friends, welcome to the special lecture Symbolic Expression, and we have Manisha Sharma with us as sign language expert. And today's topic of discussion is the portrayal of wars in Hindi films. In the earlier lecture on the portrayal of wars in Hindi films, we talked about the relevance of cinema, that how it plays an important role in dissemination of not only entertainment but also information, education and communication. And at the same time we try to see it from the perspective of that how it also plays an important role in terms of society as well, that how society borrows from cinema and how cinema also borrows from the society. So this kind of an interdependent relationship is generally seen in this particular context, and we find that when we talk about the films which have been based on war in the Hindi cinema, and these films how they are able to communicate not only about the events or the details of those wars in a certain manner, but at the same time they are also trying to project the kind of close relationship between cinema and the songs which are there in that particular film, because definitely we have seen that over the years songs, they have definitely played an important role in progression of many of the films, and how they are also closely liked by the audience in India. And from that point of view, we also talked about a film called Sikandar, which was based on a war which was during the ancient times, and thereafter we also talked about Hakikat, which was on the 1962 India-China war. And when you talk about the various kinds of references, then one can refer to Hindi films which are made on war. Then David Lorocco edited the philosophy of war films. Sameer Chopra, Bollywood does Battle, the war movie and the Indian popular imagination. Then Gulzar's and others, Encyclopedia of Hindi Cinema. So these are some of the readings which one can refer when one is talking about the war films, and definitely the war films are the most important source which provide a lot of information about those films. And when you talk about, as we earlier talked about, that in Hakikat, that particular song Ab Tumhare Hamare Watan Sathiyon, how it became popular at that point of time, and it was not only that one but in the later times as well, we find that some of the songs how they have been closely connected to the image of the soldier and to the image of a peasant, so they have also become very popular. And when we talk about the films which have been made, Hakikat we have already discussed. Then another film was Saath Hindustani, which was made in 1969, and in this it was the debut film of Amitabh Bachchan, who played the role of a Muslim poet who is from Bihar, and there are other people, those who join him, and all of them belong to the different religions of India, and how they join their seventh comrade Maria, and played by Shehnaz. And we find that who was a native of the Portuguese occupied Goa, and all of them, they raised the nationalist sentiments in the state by hoisting the Indian flags on Portuguese forts and the buildings. So this film basically talked about the liberation of Goa, and how also the question of communal harmony was also very, very important, as we have seen that many a times the country has been witness to a situation where it has been divided on the basis of language. So the film generally talks about that how the communal harmony is an important aspect in the Indian context, and when people they will live in communal harmony, then only there will be peace. Then we also find that some other films, one was Vijeta, which was made in 1982, and this was notable for some rarely seen aerial photography of the combat aircraft active with Indian Air Force in the 1980s, and it was very realistic in nature, and the central character of Angad is a MiG-21 pilot and is shown flying aircraft in ground attack role in Indo-Pakistan War of 1971. And when you see the movie, then much of the film, including the climax involving a MiG-21, was shot at Pune, and IF, Indian Air Force number 4 Squadron, Uriels provided pilots and planes for film's aerial sequences. So that is why we find that there was a lot of realism which was associated with this particular film, and many of the shots, they were breathtaking in nature, and the usage of the original warplanes, etc., and the people, those who were associated in terms of flying those warplanes, provided a lot of authenticity to the film as well. Then we also find that other films like Akraman, which was made in 1975, it highlighted the bravery and courage of the Indian soldiers and the airmen during the last days of the present 1971 war, when India defeated Pakistan. And we find that this war was very important from various viewpoints, that India, with this, East Pakistan was finished and Bangladesh was created. And we find that the kind of violence which Pakistan had perpetrated in the eastern part, where the Bengalis of the which they had to suffer a lot because of the kind of violence which was perpetrated by the Pakistani forces. And at the same time, we also see it in the framework of the foreign policy initiatives, that how when this part became independent, that the kind of problems which were there from the side of Pakistan, they also vanished, in that sense that Bangladesh was a more cordial kind of neighbor from the Indian point of view. And we also have seen that the role which was played by the Indian government in the liberation of Bangladesh, in that sense that how the Indian forces defeated Pakistan, that is how Bangladesh was created. So, and at the same time, how Indian government also, and the people as well, they provided a lot of humanitarian assistance to them as well. And it also exposed the brutal policy of Pakistan in Bangladesh. And then we also see that other films, they were also dealing, because as this war had a lot of historic significance as well. So another film called Border, which was made in 1997, was also set during this time, and it is also an adaptation of the real life events that happened during the Battle of Longewala in 1971. And a very popular song of this film called Sandese Aate Hain also became very popular as well, and it also got the national award as well. And when you talk about this particular film, we also see that this film provided anti-war message as well, that how the border, it intended to make an appeal against the war. And when you see the climax of the film, how it depicted the most soldiers, those who have died, and the kind of trauma it caused to their family members. So definitely such kind of portrayals, when they try to show that wars are not a solution, rather the solution has to be found by, in a way, talking, in that sense, on a table, coming to some kind of deliberations on the table, then only we will be able to in that sense arrive at some kind of a situation which will lead to peace. So when you talk about the kind of lyrics of that song Mere Dushman Mere Bhai, which criticizes the war and describes the disastrous effects of the war with lines हम अपने अपने खेतों में गेहूं की जगह चावल की जगह ये बंदूकें क्यों बोते हैं जब दोनों ही की गलियों में कुछ भूखे बच्चे रोते हैं. So the argument is that why we are growing guns in our farms instead of wheat and the rice, which is more important in terms of that the children in both the countries, they are crying due to the hunger. And the focus of the government is on acquiring more and more weapons, and which should not be the case. And this film was also awarded the title of the best feature film on national integration as well. So when you talk about the kinds of positive aspects of such kind of portrayals, that when these kinds of films, when they are being made, then they are trying to also give you a message that war is not the kind of recourse which should be taken up by the people, those who are at the situation where they have to take such kind of decisions. Then another film called LOC Kargil, which was made in 2003, which was based on the 1919 Operation Vijay, and the film takes you into the lives of the soldiers, those who are fighting the war against the Pakistani intruders and who tried to strategically occupy the Kargil sector. And this was also the longest running film ever made, with a running time of 255 minutes. And we also have seen that Kargil war was the first televised war in India, and its memories were also very, very strong, that this kind of a war was also shown on the television, because in the 1990s we find that how television became important, and its reach also increased with the arrival of the cable television and with the arrival of the DTH, direct to home, as well. So we find that if the Gulf War was televised across Europe and other countries of the world, then the Kargil war in the framework of India was the first war which was shown on the television. And a number of films where we find that the backdrop of Kargil has been used. One was Laksh, which was again dealing with the Kargil war, but at the same time the film is in which Hrithik Roshan's realizations of one's own goal of life happens, and when he finally participates in the Kargil war, and his quest is connected in a way with the national duty as well, and how the protagonist is able to realize his self in the larger interest of the nation is being shown in that particular film. Then we also see that another film called 1971, which was made in 2007, it was also talking about the Indo-Pakistan War of 1971, and it talks or tells or narrates the story of 6 prisoners of war and how they escaped the Pakistani army. And it also shows the internal unrest in Pakistan when each side wants to separate itself from the West. Another film was Ghazi Attack, which was based on 2000. It was made in 2017, and it was based on the mysterious sinking of PNS Ghazi during the Indo-Pakistani Naval War of 1971. And it was about the valor of the crew aboard Indian submarine INS Karanj S-21, which destroyed Pakistani PNS Ghazi when it ventured into Indian waters to destroy INS Vikrant on the shores of Visakhapatnam. So this film was some kind of which was dealing with in water, in that sense that it was providing some kind of a background in the context of the naval war. It was dealing with Navy, and this film was in a way, the way it was trying to project the kind of situation which existed in that time, and it also in a way narrates the mysterious circumstances about the Ghazi's fate, with its sinking credited to the actions of INS Rajput. So when we talk about this film, then we find that finally when the film ends, it mentions in the aftermath of Ghazi's sinking, India and Pakistan, they had declared war on each other, and which would ultimately result in India's victory and Pakistan's surrender and the creation of Bangladesh. So such kind of narratives, they try to communicate that what all happened before and after the 1971 war. And when the situation of 1971 war was created, there were other events which were happening in the different armed forces at different places. Another film by J.P. Datta, which was made in 2018, was Paltan, and which was based on the clashes between the Indian and the Chinese troops in the regions of Nathula and Chola, and the clashes along the Sikkim border after the 1962 Sino-Indian War, and how the Indian troops, they defeated the Chinese troops here and stopped their attempts to encroach on the Indian territory. And in the context of the contemporary situation, in terms of the border clashes with China, we are also able to relate such kind of portrayals, that such kind of incursions, they have been made time and again by China, and how Indian forces, they are in a way trying to negotiate with the Chinese forces, and how many a times because of such kind of skirmishes, such kind of conflicts, soldiers, they have to lose their lives. So we find that such kind of portrayals in the films, they not only try to communicate what all is happening happened at that point of time, but at the same time they also try to communicate that the contemporary situation is also as a result of the past events. And another film which became very popular was Uri or Surgical Strike, and it was in a way dramatized account of the true events of the retaliation to the 2016 Uri attacks. And we find that in 2016 4 heavily armed militant attacked the brigade headquarters at Uri, Jammu and Kashmir at dawn, killing 19 soldiers in their sleep. And the Indian retaliation to this attack, seeking the revenge of that encounter, and the role played by Vicky Kaushal in that particular film was applauded. And at the same time we also find that how the expert army men, those who were employed in terms of seeking guidance in terms of portrayal of many of the scenes, that is how this film became very popular. Then another film called Gunjan Saxena, Kargil Girl, in which Janhavi Kapoor played the role of the protagonist, and it deals with the Indian Air Force pilot Gunjan Saxena, one of the first Indian female Air Force pilots in combat, first being Srividya Rajan. So it also deals with the Kargil war and how the Gunjan and another pilot, they take separate helicopters and go over to aid the injured soldiers, and how she rescues other pilot and the wounded soldiers and successfully completes risky operation. So in that sense this film was also important, that how it was talking about the role of a woman in the context of the courage and bravery which was being shown in the Kargil war. And many times we find that nowadays women, they have been inducted into the various armed forces, and many of the ranks which were not opened for them earlier, they have also been opened for the women. So such kind of portrayals also definitely play an important role in terms of disseminating information about the role of women in the armed forces, and definitely they also motivate other women to join the armed forces as well. And the arrival of a number of women in the filmmaking business in the diversified fields where they are able to bring some kind of a refreshing viewpoint could also be seen. Then recently we saw a film in 2021 which was again set up during the Indo-Pakistani War of 1971, Bhuj, the Pride of India, and it follows Indian Air Force squadron leader Vijay Karnik, then in charge of Bhuj Air Force Base, and who with the help of 300 local women reconstructed the damaged landing strip into 72 hours. So the help which was given by the local people and the kind of support which was given by the local people, and how the valor of the armed forces also related to it, and the never say die spirit which is being exhibited by the armed forces in such kind of circumstances, could also be seen in this particular film as well. Then as I told you earlier, that recently a film called Sher Shah, which was made in 2021, which was dealing with the story of Captain Vikram Batra, a young braveheart who was responsible for India's victory during 1999 Operation Vijay, and how he was also interviewed by some of the news channels, and his interviews, they were being shown on those news channels, and people of those that particular generation, those who watched the Kargil war on television, they may even recollect his interview where before his martyrdom, when he was again engaged in some other operation. So this film basically tells the story of various unsung heroes as well, not only Vikram Batra, who lost his life, but Dimple Chima, who was Batra's fiancée, who spent her life like a widow after he was martyred in war. So in that context, the role of women in the lives of the army men, that how when these army men, they go to the field, then women, they have to in a way manage the home, as well as the kind of sacrifices they have to do in the context of the and the absence of men in their home at that point of time. So such kind of portrayals of women, they also provide an opportunity in that sense when women, they enter and they work in the diversified field, and this could also be seen on the various television and the OTT platforms as well. Apart from that, we also see that how there's a film which is coming, which is being made recently, which is Sam Bahadur, which is a biopic which is based on the life of India's Field Marshal Sam Manekshaw, and Vicky Kaushal is playing the titular role in this particular film, and how Sam Manekshaw, who was the chief of the army staff of the Indian Army, and he commanded the Indian forces during the India-Pakistan 1971 war. So he was there in the army, and how the Indian Army was commanded by him during that time. And the name of the film was announced on the birth anniversary of Manekshaw by Vicky Kaushal. Another film, 21, is based on the life of Paramveer Chakra recipient Arun Khetrapal, who martyred during the 1971 Indo-Pakistan war, and Varun Dhawan is going to play the lead role in this particular film. So this film again is going to be made in recent times, and such kind of portrayals, when such kind of films they are being made, then we realize that we are not aware about that how many people they have lost their lives for the sake of the country, and their contribution in our lives, that we are living safely because of their martyrdom, because of the kind of contribution which they have made to the nation. And many times we see that critics, they have criticized these films that they are away from reality, and many times details are not correct, they are too melodramatic in nature. But one has to also realize that cinema is also a commercial activity apart from being an art form. And in recent times we find that unrecorded events of the past, unheard stories, they have also been presented on the screen because of the kind of contribution which has been made by some of the script writers and directors and the producers, those who have produced these films. And because of which we are not only able to know about that particular matter, but at the same time we are also able to realize the pain of those families. So with this, I'd like to end the discussion. Thank you very much.